Hi, I'm Noah Dankner, and my Interdisciplinary Studies concentration is sound recording, production, and design, in which I've studied audio in the fields of music and recording, theater, and film. I'd like to start off by thanking my advisors Stephen McAlpin, Anna Rubin, and my interdisciplinary advisor Patricia Lanou. The purpose of my project was to create a complete film soundtrack for the silent film The Rivals. This afternoon, I would like to show you an example from my project, give you a little bit of background about the film I used, as well as a brief history of sound and motion pictures. Then I'll explain the production process of my project while giving an overview of the sound production process in the film industry. I'd like to start off by showing you a clip of the film Silent. As you watch it, think about what sounds you would add. So what sounds would you add to this? Great. Now here's what I did. The Rivals is a 12-minute short produced by Edison Manufacturing Company in August of 1907. It's nearly 100 years old. It was made by studio head and leading director of the time, Edwin Porter, and his partner, J. Searle Dawley. The film was based on a popular comic strip of the time, Charlie and George, by T.E. Powers, which ran in the New York American. So how did motion picture sound originate? Integrating sound with motion pictures was actually conceived from the very beginning of film itself. The Edison Manufacturing Company first showed a prototype of their kinetoscope in 1891. This was the first motion picture system to display moving photographic images on film. This very first prototype was actually capable of connecting to a phonograph. This is the first known experiment of recording synchronized sound with a motion picture, which was conducted at Edison Labs by W.K.L. Dixon in 1894 and 95. In 1895, Edison marketed the kinetophone commercially, which was a kinetoscope and a phonograph built into one cabinet. Due to technical limitations, it was not yet commercially viable. Then again in 1913, Edison marketed a projection version of the kinetophone. But like the original, it still wasn't commercially viable, and early films were made silent. However, silent films were exhibited with accompanied live music and sometimes live effects. In fact, scores were actually composed for pianists, organists, and sometimes even live orchestras to play during a film's exhibition. Then, throughout the 1920s, better and more commercially practical motion picture sound systems were being developed. These were the four major systems developed for commercial use, with the Warner Brothers Vitaphone sound-on-disc system being in the forefront. With these systems, commercial features finally got synchronized sound. In 1926, Don Juan was the first commercial feature-length film with a synchronized soundtrack throughout the entire film. It only had music and effects and no dialogue. Then, in 1927, The Jazz Singer was the first talkie. Around this same time, Universal was just finishing a silent picture, which was based on the popular musical Showboat. Due to the popularity of Warner Brothers sound pictures, Universal felt that they couldn't now release a film that was based on a musical as a silent film. So at the last minute, a composite music and effects track was added. This was done in one session after the film had been shot. Jack Foley and a team did the effects in real time while watching a playback of the movie in synchronization to the picture. This was later called Foley, and here Foley was born. I'd like to now talk about the production process I used in my project. There are 3 stages in film production. Pre-production is everything that happens before shooting, such as writing the script. Production is when the film is shot, and post-production is everything that happens after the film is shot, such as editing. Because this film was already shot, everything I did would be considered post-production in the context of this film's entire production process. These are the audio-related tasks of post-production, the continuation of sound design which starts in pre-production, music recording, sound effects, and dialogue re-recording and editing. In my project, I concentrated on the first three. Even though all my work is post-production in the context of the film's entire production process, within the context of just my work, I use this analogy to distinguish work done prior to recording, and post-production, which was anything I did after recording. During my pre-production process, I first had to select an appropriate film to work with that lent itself to a soundtrack. Being silent, these early films were not made with sound in mind. The next step was creating an appropriate sound design to map out an overall structure for the sound, figuring out what sounds would go where, what kind of music I wanted to use based on the mood and emotional layer. During my production phase, I recorded Foley effects and live music. Foley effects are emulated sound effects that are performed and recorded in sync to the picture in real time while the Foley artist is watching a playback of the picture. Foley effects can be organized into these three categories. Feet is footsteps. Moves is any sound created by human movement, such as rubbing your hands together or the rustling of clothes. And specifics is everything else, or sounds of a person handling an object, such as a doorknob or keys. I actually played the role of the entire Foley team. During post-production, I first took on the role of a sound effects editor, who's responsible for all the sounds not covered by the Foley artist. This person records natural sounds in the field. These include big sounds such as explosions, and also takes pre-recorded sounds from effects libraries, and then edits and syncs these sounds with the picture. My other tasks in post-production included editing and syncing music and effects, and finally creating a final mix of all these elements. I'd like to end with how film sound production is interdisciplinary. Well, the sound design is part of the storytelling, so it starts with the writing and is an integral part of the script. A recording engineer needs to understand the physics of sound, such as how sound is generated, wave propagation, and acoustics. He also needs to know about the technology used, such as audio electronics and microphones. He must have an understanding of how human hearing works, and he must also know about human perception of sound. These are the psychological elements, such as psychoacoustics, how the brain interprets sound, and how sound is perceived when it's combined with the picture, because you can't really separate the two. And finally, he needs to have a background in music. A good soundtrack that works is most likely not just a random collection of music, dialogue, and effects, but is based on a well-thought-out design of how these elements work together in an entire sonic structure and in conjunction with the picture to create the desired effects, whether they be to create realism, evoke an emotional response, or express a character's point of view. Thank you.